we'll start with this. My final thoughts on this weekend's big rematch, what is a very big fight, an important fight for Katie Taylor on the heels of her first professional loss to reigning undisputed champion Chantel Cameron. Can she do it? Can she win? Is this weekend's fight going to be a repeat of the last one, or will it end in revenge?
If you've been following this channel long enough, you will have heard me say that rematches are often won by the fighter who can make the most adjustments, the fighter who can change. If you're Chantel, you really don't have to.
You'll go into the second fight doing more of what you did in the first. Thus, I don't expect to see a different Chantel Cameron this weekend.
I don't. It's Katie Taylor that has to change.
Katie Taylor made an in-fight adjustment in the middle of the last fight, the first one. In those early rounds, she was trying to keep distance and create space to set up counters. That wasn't working. After a few rounds, she decided to just go for it, use her speed mid-range to inside to fluster Chantel Cameron, and that was actually working.
Instead of trying to stay on the outside of Chantel, she had more success boxing mid-range to inside, where her speed counts for her the most. And I expect to see her do that in this rematch. Instead of keeping away from Chantel, she's going to keep with her, keep on her.
How Dimitri Bivol did with Zurdo Ramirez, bouncing back and forth on the balls of his feet, not quite all the way on the outside, but not all the way on the inside either, just keeping with him and keeping on him. I expect to see Katie do that with Chantel for a long time!
I asked myself, I wondered, what can Katie Taylor possibly do differently in a second fight that she did not do in the first?
Katie started off the fight the wrong way, using the wrong base style. She started off that fight the way a pure boxer would, whereas Chantel started off the fight the way a pressure fighter would. And we all know that pressure fighters, they give pure boxers a lot of problems. That aggression, that spite, that volume.
Staying on the outside, working off the counter, and only throwing 1 or 2 punches at a time, that's not how you respond to the pressure from a pressure fighter or anyone fighting like a pressure fighter. The silver lining for Katie is she's not limited to just one base style. And in truth, neither is Chantel, but I don't expect Chantel to change.
She's not the one that has to, so why would she? I'm expecting to see the same Chantel from the first fight in the second tomorrow, whereas
Katie's the one that has to, and she did in the middle of the last fight. So deriving from those experiences and everything that happened in the last fight, she will approach the second one with a better game plan.
It's the game plan, you ask. I think instead of keeping away from Chantel and trying to stay on the outside to get off counters, I think she's going to keep with her. I think she's going to keep on her.
I think instead of pot-shotting from the outside, she's going to rip combinations mid-range to inside, 3 and 4 punch combinations.
I think instead of beating those feet to get on the outside of the punches that are coming at her, she's going to work around them. That's head movement, that's upper body movement, that's angles, that's pivots, all within striking distance, inside the pocket.
Within striking distance, because running didn't help. Running, it didn't work.
You have to fight her off. Chantel Cameron, just like Katie Taylor, she's got 2 base styles too, but the style she's going to use is that of the pressure fighter. She's just going to apply more pressure, looking for a knockout. And you don't deal with pressure fighters by keeping space and running away. You have to fight them off.
Get some respect.
I expect things to pick up quickly in this fight in the early goings of it. I expect Katie to meet Chantel in the center of the ring, looking to angle off and roll and counter, slip and counter, and stay with her while you're still fresh. See if you can't pick up those early rounds. Maybe amass an early lead, and most of all, get some respect.
Caveat with this strategy is it will require more from Katie Taylor earlier than before making that decision.
It will require more earlier from the smaller, older fighter. So she could burn out. She could slow down in the middle, leaving the door open for Chantel to take over. But what was working for her the last time was the flurries, the combinations, and taking it to Chantel.
I feel like she's going to put together 3 and 4 punch combinations, fall in, then hold, tie Chantel up,
smother her, then repeat it to keep at it, frustrate Chantel, and before you know it, the rounds are whizzing by, which isn't a safe bet, but it's her best bet. At this point, it's her only bet and her only chance to beat Chantel Cameron. I'm taking it on faith that Katie Taylor will not only make the necessary adjustment,
but she will win a split decision.
And don't kid yourself. If you want to go with Chantel, go with Chantel. You have reason enough to do it. It's entirely possible that Katie Taylor, in applying this strategy, she could get herself knocked out.
It's possible, but rematches are often won by the fighter who can make the most adjustments, and I don't expect Chantel to make any. I expect her to go out there and do what was working for her before. It's Katie that has to change, and I think she's going to.
She's done it before. She did it with Delphine Passoon. I think she's about to do it now with Chantel Cameron.
There's a lot of people, they don't like Katie's chances in this rematch. I don't blame them. She's 37, Chantel is 32. She's bigger, younger, and stronger.
So I'm taking it on faith that she still has enough left in the tank for one more big fight, one more big win. Katie Taylor on points is the pick.
As it pertains to the PBC pay-per-view, also set to go down tomorrow night, the fight that David Benavidez and Demetrius Andrade are headlining. In the co-main event, we have WBC middleweight champion Jermall Charlo and former welterweight title challenger Jose Benavidez. And I told you in my previous video, I'm not touching that thing. Jermall Charlo on paper is the safe bet, but the condition of him and the fact that he actually blew the weight.
Remember that this isn't even a middleweight contest. In order to accommodate Jermall Charlo, they billed it at a contracted weight of, I think, 163 pounds, and he came in at 166. Missed it on the first try, comes back for the second, gained even more weight.
He already blew the weight by 3 pounds. He comes back for a second try. He weighs even more than he did the first time. I don't know what kind of headspace that guy is in, but what I do know is this is not the kind of job where you can phone it in, where you can just go through the motions. If you really don't want to be there, that's going to show.
I really don't trust Jermall to get the job done, though at the same time, I don't trust Jose either. He's about as much a middleweight as I am an astronaut, so I'm not touching that thing. I ain't got no fight prediction for that one.
As it pertains to the main event of that same show, as it pertains to David Benavidez versus Demetrius Andrade, many of you will have already heard me say on several live streams in the build-up that I'm going with David Benavidez. I'm going with David on the predication that I don't think the PBC will let Demetrius Andrade win a points decision, and he's not a knockout merchant, so the odds of him taking it out of the judges' hands are slim to nil. I expect Demetrius to get off to a strong start, the way he usually does. I even think it's possible that he might score an early knockdown because David Benavidez has a bad habit of giving his opponent both shoulders, squaring up while he's coming in and putting punches together. If he gets caught while he's doing that,
he'll be off balance and he could go over. It wouldn't be the first time. Ronald Gavril sat him on his back pocket some years ago, and this weekend, Demetrius might in the early goings of the fight.
Caleb Plant, in his last fight, he had success early against David Benavidez, and I suspect that Demetrius Andrade could do one better. Out of the southpaw stance, being tricky, herky-jerky, nuts and bolts boxing, he's still a better nuts and bolts technical and tactical boxer than David Benavidez, but David is younger and naturally bigger.
Heavier. They're both eye level to each other, Demetrius Andrade and David Benavidez. David is the naturally heavier fighter, though you will notice that Demetrius is long and limber.
Those long levers, I feel that Demetrius can touch David Benavidez from a safe distance, from the outside coming in and on the go, and on the move, while cutting angles, beating those feet. I think the first half of the fight, Demetrius Andrade will do well, though because he's in his mid-30s and because he has faded down the stretch before.
And because David Benavidez is a pressure guy, he sets a fast pace for a fight. He's gonna keep you moving. He's gonna keep you working. I feel that will wear on Demetrius Andrade's energy reserves eventually, at which point David Benavidez will pick up the second half of the fight on activity, just activity alone. Don't forget who the promoters are invested in.
David Benavidez marching forward like a robot behind that high guard, being aggressive, just being aggressive and throwing combinations. That'll be enough for the judges to give him those rounds if Demetrius isn't busy in the second half, if he tries pot-shotting from the outside to reserve energy.
To survive.
David Benavidez, much like in the Caleb Plant fight, is promising his followers and his supporters a knockout, though I don't think he'll get it. If you couldn't knock out Caleb Plant, who was exhausted for the entire second half of your fight with him the last time, I don't think you're knocking out a craftier, herky-jerkier fighter, a southpaw, in Demetrius Andrade. I feel like Demetrius, he will hear the final bell, and he will lose a points decision.
I honestly feel that the most Demetrius can hope for in this fight, the most that he can get, is a draw.
That if some of you out there have Demetrius winning as many as 7 to 8 of the 12 rounds in the fight, the most that'll get him is a draw, because the PBC is not invested in a 35-year-old southpaw that isn't a knockout merchant and has next to no drawing power. That if he actually does enough to win a points decision, more than enough, the most that'll get him is a draw. And in all likelihood, what's going to happen is David will get the decision.
He's the one they're really invested in. You don't need to be Burt Sugar to know that.
It's the PBC we're talking about. This is the same PBC that awarded Rolly Romero a gift decision over Jackson Mariñez, and the same PBC that awarded him a gift stoppage over punches that he didn't even land. If they did that for a fighter like Rolly, you think they wouldn't rob Demetrius for David?
That may seem cynical to all of you, but having been a boxing fan as long as I've been a boxing fan, these things happen, and I could totally see them taking the decision away from Demetrius, even if he deserves it, to give it to David.
Not even saying that that's David's only path to a victory. It's entirely possible he wins the fight legitimately, wins the fight on points behind activity and aggression, though I reiterate, if they have to rob Demetrius to give it to David, they will. They ain't got no problem with that.
David Benavidez on points is the pick. I don't think he knocks out Demetrius, but I do think he gets a points decision. By hook or by crook, David on points is the logical way to go.
Just in keeping with the theme of all things super middleweight and all things PBC, Ronnie Shields, who trains unbeaten up-and-comer David Morrell, said when they offered the fight to Benavidez, they said no. Nobody knows him.
When this year started out, you heard it from both David Benavidez's father and David Benavidez's promoter that he would cap off this year with a David Morrell fight.
The tune changed somewhere in the middle. Ronnie Shields' account of events, Ronnie Shields says, when I first started training David Morrell, after the very first fight, they came and they offered a fight with David Benavidez in the next fight, Shields recalled. I told Morrell's managers no. I said no. Why would I want to do that right now when I only got one fight with him? So now he's got 9 fights.
What Ronnie Shields is basically admitting is that David Morrell had the opportunity to fight David Benavidez, but he was guided away from that, at least at that time.
Ronnie Shields continued, but after my 3rd fight with him, I said make the fight, because now I feel more comfortable that he's understanding and paying attention to what I want him to do. I couldn't do it after the first fight. It takes a couple of fights, you know, and David kept improving. So I said, let's do it. Benavidez's representatives instead picked Demetrius Andrade as the first left-handed opponent David Benavidez will box in more than 7 years. Andrade remains undefeated and has won world titles in the junior middleweight and middleweight divisions, but he's 35 years old. 9 years older than Benavidez and 10 years older than David Morrell. Likely the rationale, the hierarchy of thought. Why fight Demetrius instead of David Morrell? It's because he's naturally smaller, moving up in weight, and some years older.
He's a little bit more well-known, not to suggest that Demetrius Andrade is a household name, far from it, but he is a little bit more well-known than David Morrell, who just has a little over a handful of fights. He's only got something like 8 or 9 fights.
And he's a puncher. Demetrius isn't. Demetrius Andrade, he's a lot of things. A former Olympian, experienced, a former champion at 2 weights, but one thing he's not is a puncher. He ain't got big power like David Morrell has got big power. So you can see why one fight might have been more appealing to Team Benavidez than the other. When they offered the fight to them, they said no. Shields said in reference to Benavidez's handlers. They said, nobody knows him. I said, hold up, nobody knows him now. Why didn't nobody know him when he had 5 fights? They knew him much less then. So I said, you know what? Let's go on to the next one. And I understand where Ronnie's coming from. If you were okay to fight him when he was 5-0, why would you not be okay to fight him when he's 9-0? You say that nobody knows him, but nobody knew him then, and you were okay to fight him then. So what's the difference between now and then? And the difference is he's more experienced now.
And you've had a closer look at him now. Now he seems like a hot potato. Before, he was just a greenhorn.
A guy with just a handful of fights, just 5 professional fights, and now he's got 9. He's not that much more experienced, but you've had a closer look at him. And you don't like what you see. It's not about no one knowing him. When nobody knew him before, you were okay to fight him before.
It's not about that.
I don't think they want the fight, Shield said. I think they realize that Morrell is a different monster now. He's not the same guy they saw when he had 5 fights. I think they see something different, and I know David is different, and they know it. So I really, truly don't think they want that fight. But eventually it's going to happen. I don't think it'll be at 68. I really believe they will fight, but it'll be at light heavyweight. I think in a year's time, they'll both be at light heavyweight. I really, truly believe that. Now, David Morrell is supposed to be seeing action at least one more time before this year is out in what is set to be Showtime's final fight.
The final card aired on the Showtime platform before Showtime Boxing calls it quits.
And that's on the 16th of next month. If he takes care of business, you have to wonder what he's going to do the following year. You say that guys like David Benavidez are over there and guys like Caleb Plant are over there, but I'm fairly confident neither one of those guys wants to share the ring with David at this time. It's just too much of a risk and not enough of a reward.
And all this stuff about the PBC jumping into bed with Amazon for a pay-per-view distribution deal, where would that leave a virtual unknown like David Morrell, who's entertaining to watch? He's a talented fighter, but nobody knows him.
In an ideal world and more favorable circumstances, this is where a promoter builds a fighter through their relationship with a broadcast partner, fight by fight, on regular shows, not sticking the guy on the undercard of pay-per-views that people may or may not buy. That means they may or may not see him.
Not buried on undercards. I guess the saving grace for David Morrell is that he is young and he only has 9 fights. He needs more experience.
Question is, can they actually get him that? When all you're doing are pay-per-views and you have so many fighters to accommodate, so many guys looking for a fight date, how does David Morrell not get lost in the sauce?
Fall through the cracks.
I don't really know what's going to happen in the next 12 months for David Morrell.